Final Fantasy VII and its entire compilation are known for many different things, but one of them absolutely has to be its iconic openings. The original 1997 RPG has one of the most iconic openings ever in a video game, and 2020's Final Fantasy VII Remake brilliantly recreated it. However, considering that the remake project is a trilogy, Square Enix couldn't simply just reuse that iconic opening for Remake, Rebirth, and the third and final title in the trilogy. While Final Fantasy VII Remake offered a perfect recreation of the original game, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth started in a way I don't think anyone was expecting. Instead of jumping right into the party as they leave Midgar behind and step into the open world, you're thrown into a world with none other than Zack Fair as he chases Shinra helicopters that have Aerith and the rest of the party unconscious. As we sit here in the waiting game for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, I personally have been thinking a lot about how Square Enix is going to open this final part of the trilogy. Both openings so far have been immensely satisfying, and if Rebirth is anything to go by, I feel that Square Enix is going to embrace the element of surprise. Welcome back to Under the Plate, and today let's dive into what could possibly be a shocking opening for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. As we know, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 has so much to go through. There's the entire sequence with the North Crater and the Black Materia, Meteor being summoned, and Judgment Day for Barret and Tifa, and of course the iconic fights against the weapons, the chase for the huge Materia, putting them onto the rocket, and the unforgettable final boss. All of these things are great, but they don't happen near the beginning of the game. Therefore, Square Enix is either going to have to get creative or just throw us into a location like Icicle Inn and have the party land walking off the tiny Bronco as the credits roll in. However, as I hinted at in the intro of this video, I just don't think that's what's going to happen. Subverting expectations and surprising players has been the key thing about this remake trilogy that continues to deliver over time. Therefore, when discussing the opening of this final title in the trilogy, I think there is only one option that could truly blow players' minds. Why not open up the game with a playable sequence from Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis? Now, I know what you're thinking. No, I don't think that the remake trilogy is going to change art styles completely and all of a sudden we're playing in chibi-like characters. It's not the style of Ever Crisis that I'm talking about, but the content, and specifically content for The First Soldier, the game's original story. If you haven't ever touched Ever Crisis before just because it's on mobile or it's a game you're not very familiar with, there is some incredibly important context in The First Soldier storyline that is very relevant to the remake trilogy. As we've established on countless episodes of Under the Plate, the goal of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy is to ultimately tie together the entire compilation, and said compilation now includes Ever Crisis and the First Soldier storyline in particular. The First Soldier takes place in 1992, well before the events of Final Fantasy VII. Thus far, 2 episodes have been released, with the second ongoing, and generally the focus has been on none other than Sephiroth. It's almost a dream come true to truly see his backstory be formed in real time through this mobile game. And funny enough, it would not be the first time that Square Enix has put such important lore inside a mobile experience. Looking at you, Kingdom Hearts. I could sit here and talk about everything that's happened in The First Soldier thus far, but generally, just to give a brief overview of some very important plot points we've seen, Episode 1 has a huge focus on Glenn Lodbrok and his companions when they first encounter Sephiroth. Much of the story takes place in the past until it jumps forward in Chapter 8 to show Sephiroth fighting a beast and becoming a hero. This sequence in particular is extremely important to the future and especially the remake trilogy, as at the very end of Episode 1, Sephiroth is seen standing at the edge of creation. The Edge of Creation was first introduced in Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it has been a key part of everything going on with the new additions to the story. We were able to revisit it at the end of Rebirth, and of course it's going to play a key role in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. Beyond the Edge of Creation, there is still so much more that could tie into the future in Part 3. As Episode 2 of The First Soldier sees a young Angeal interact with a young Sephiroth. So far, Episode 2 has done quite a few things to advance the story. It's introduced a character named Alyssa who looks eerily similar to Lucrezia. And if you think about Sephiroth and his connection to Lucrezia, there's a reason that this plot point could end up being something very significant. In addition to this, there has been critical expansion to the lore of how Sephiroth obtained the Masamune in the first place. And this has just been awesome to see, as there's so much depth to this sword I never thought possible. So, with that being said, the First Soldier's story is very interesting and has many ties to Sephiroth's past. But how exactly could this connect to the opening of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3? For me personally, it boils down to the simple fact that the First Soldier's storyline is clearly extremely important to Sephiroth in the Remake trilogy. When I think about the narrative structure of this third and final part, I can't help but feel that some of the events we've seen in this game must be included to fully give us the clear picture of Sephiroth. And when you consider that this team just loves to surprise and probably has a huge task of aiming to surprise players at the opening of the game, I feel that some playable section involving this content from Ever Crisis would be the match made in heaven. This content must be included somewhere. And by opening up with a glimpse into Sephiroth's past life, the team can slowly start to put the pieces together for players to understand his character more as we lead to the climax of this story. The development team could go about this in numerous ways, simply just one-to-one translating some of these sequences from Ever Crisis or depicting something we haven't even seen yet. For me, I think that moment at the end of Episode 1 where Sephiroth is seen standing before the Edge of Creation is a moment that deserves to open up this game. Sephiroth is seen at the Edge of Creation after reflecting on his encounter with Rosen, a character that he killed after Rosen begged him to reunite him with his people. Sephiroth, being young at the time, tried to convince him to come with him, but Rosen refused. And I can't help but feel that this encounter clearly shaped Sephiroth in many ways.
さあやれ。もたもたしてるとみんな死ぬぞ。助けたいのは僕じゃないだろ。決めろ。生き延びてほしいのは誰だ。
やめろ。セネオス、やめろ。
This is just one of the moments that I really do feel could benefit being in Part 3 to give Sephiroth that depth when he was younger. But even then, I firmly believe that the development team will likely make something completely original if we do get some sort of a flashback sequence with young Sephiroth. The Ever Crisis stuff has been absolutely fascinating, but to be truthful, we know this team likes their surprises, and I'll be honest, I'd be shocked if they played their hand already with this Ever Crisis stuff. But touching on that, the element of surprise is really the point of this entire video. When you think about how to open Part 3 and really make players excited, I can't think of anything that would leave fans more enthralled than a playable Sephiroth flashback in his younger days. While Ever Crisis has been an excellent story to experience on mobile and PC, I'll be quite honest, much of the fandom is almost unaware of what's been happening in this game. It's been pretty surprising to me that there hasn't been more discussion on the events we've seen thus far, especially in Episode 2. And I really do feel that these are going to be very important pieces of this final part of the trilogy, considering that once again, the goal of this entire project is to pull in every bit and piece of Final Fantasy VII. Wouldn't it be weird if this huge story development over the last couple years didn't make it in? I feel like the fact that Glenn Lodbrok, a character that Tetsuya Nomura confirmed was made for Rebirth, not Ever Crisis, already has been teased to have a role in Part 3, is very crucial to this development with Ever Crisis. Rebirth not only teased Glenn and had him appear in multiple scenes, but it even name-dropped his two companions from Ever Crisis, being Matt and Lucia. These plot points have already been sprinkled in, and when it comes to that Sephiroth stuff, which is clearly much more important than Glenn and the others, it feels like a crime to not include it in Part 3 somewhere. Beyond Part 3, we also have to look at the end of Rebirth. Think about where this story left off. Cloud is in a trance, believing that Aerith is alive and well, while the rest of the party is grieving her loss. There's going to be a somber tone with the party, and for me at least, I feel that opening up with them sailing in the sky, pretending that everything's alright, is just not fitting the tone that was left by Rebirth. And sure, the party is not going to be happy or cheerful by any means when we first see them in Part 3. But when you think about a story and the hook at the beginning of a narrative to really grab players in, I think the development team is going to want to avoid just jumping into sadness. Opening up with Sephiroth would be the biggest shock of all for any player, regardless of if they're the most die-hard Final Fantasy VII fan or a complete newcomer. It also allows the game to set its tone and slowly ease into the grief the party is currently experiencing without just dumping it on the player right away and perhaps turning people away from the start. Maybe I'll end up being completely off the mark here and the team is just gonna go for it with the party landing in a new location, but considering all of the surprises we've seen thus far, and especially how Final Fantasy VII Rebirth opened, I can't help but feel that the ultimate way to kick off this final send-off for Final Fantasy VII is to dive into the series' most iconic villain at the beginning as a complete out-of-left-field surprise. But with that being said, that's gonna do it for episode 33 of Under the Plate. Thank you so much for watching this episode right to the end, and be sure to let us know down below in the comments if you think that a playable Sephiroth flashback kicking off Part 3 is as exciting as we think it might be. We're looking forward to hearing what you all think, and with that being said, be sure to stay tuned for our next episode that may just be themed after Sephiroth. We'll catch you next time.